A guy stopped me at the hardware store last spring. He'd been standing in the lumber aisle for a solid 20 minutes, staring at boards, checking his phone, and staring at boards again. He had a piece of paper in his hand with some plans he printed online. He showed them to me. The materials list at the bottom tallied up to $437. He had 6 chickens arriving in 2 weeks, and no coop to put them in. I looked at his plans for about 30 seconds. Then, I told him to put the lumber back and follow me to the other end of the store. He ended up spending $52 that afternoon. By the following Saturday morning, working alone for about 3 hours, he had a functional, weatherproof, predator-resistant coop. That coop has housed his 6 chickens through 2 full winters without a single structural issue and without losing a single bird. Today, I want to show you exactly what I showed him. I also want to explain why the chicken coop industry, with pre-built coops selling for thousands and plans going for $80, has zero interest in telling you the truth. A coop for a small backyard flock does not need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be beautiful, and it absolutely does not need to cost more than $50 to keep your chickens safe, dry, and laying eggs all year round. My name is Hope Yoder. Chickens have been part of this property since before I was born. My father kept them, his father kept them, and the coops here have been built and rebuilt over generations. My understanding of what a chicken actually needs comes from practical experience, not from a catalog trying to sell you materials. Let's start with the basics, because the gap between what a chicken needs and what the industry sells is where you lose all your money. A chicken needs exactly 4 things: protection from predators, protection from the weather, a dry place to sleep, and a nest box. That is the complete list. Not Arctic insulation, not decorative windows, and definitely not a walk-in design just so you can stand upright. A chicken doesn't care if the roof has architectural shingles. It only cares if it's dry and if a raccoon can get in. Predators are where most cheap DIY coops fail. Raccoons are incredibly strong and dexterous. They will reach right through standard chicken wire and pull a bird out. Chicken wire keeps chickens in. It does not keep predators out. That is a very expensive misunderstanding. You need hardware cloth. It's a welded wire mesh with half-inch openings, and every single gap in a properly built coop must be covered with it. Weasels and minks are your next biggest threat, and they can squeeze through a hole the size of a quarter. Again, hardware cloth is your only real solution. Next up is the floor. Many plans call for a raised wooden floor, but that just creates a perfect home for rodents underneath, and it eventually rots. The Amish approach, and our approach, has always been a dirt floor. When paired with a deep litter of straw, wood shavings, or dry leaves, a dirt floor has no space for rodents. It doesn't rot, and it lets the chickens scratch and dust bathe naturally. This brings us to the deep litter method. You start with 4 to 6 inches of carbon material, like straw or shavings on the dirt floor. Instead of constantly cleaning out the manure, you simply add more straw on top when it looks compacted. The chickens scratch it up, mixing the carbon and the nitrogen, creating a slow, aerobic composting process right in the coop. This reaction actually generates heat, keeping the coop warmer on cold nights, and it produces virtually no ammonia smell. You clean it out just once or twice a year, and by then, it's incredible garden compost. Now, let me walk you through the $50 build I showed that guy at the store. It's a simple 6x4 A-frame structure that comfortably houses 4 to 6 standard chickens. You need 6 8-foot 2x4s for the frame, 1 roll of hardware cloth with half-inch openings, 1 sheet of 8-foot corrugated metal roofing, a box of exterior screws, some staples, 2 hinges, and a raccoon-proof hook and eye latch. Prices vary, but that generally runs between $55 and $65. You cut 2 of the 2x4s to 6-foot lengths for your top ridge beam, and the other 4 become the angled sides spreading to a 4-foot base. You cover those angled sides tightly with the hardware cloth. Do not use chicken wire. The hardware cloth gives it structure and provides the massive amount of ventilation chickens need to stay healthy and avoid respiratory illness. Then, you cover the upper 2/3 of one side and the entire roof section with the metal roofing to block the rain. Install a couple of simple wooden nest boxes on the solid-sided end. Add a roosting bar about 12 to 18 inches off the floor, and build a simple hardware cloth access door. Finally, bury the bottom edge of the wire 6 inches into the soil, or stake it down hard. If you live in a really cold climate, just wrap the hardware cloth sides in clear plastic sheeting for the winter to block the wind, and rely on that deep litter compost heat. Do not use a heat lamp. They cause fires and make your flock weak. A healthy chicken in a dry, draft-free space can handle freezing temps easily. Wet and cold kills. Dry and cold is perfectly fine. There is a pattern here that applies to everything we discuss on this channel. When an industry develops around basic agriculture, things get complicated and expensive just to generate ongoing revenue. A chicken with dry bedding and safety doesn't buy monthly subscriptions. This kind of practical knowledge, what actually works versus what is sold as working, is exactly what you'll find in my books, right alongside our gardening and food preservation methods. The link is in the description, or you can find everything right here on our channel. Build the coop this weekend. Your chickens won't notice the difference between $50 and $500. Tell me in the comments if you currently keep chickens, or what's been stopping you if you haven't started yet. I read every single comment. Next time, I'll show you the feeding system my family uses that dramatically cuts down the cost of commercial feed. See you then. A $50 coop and 3 hours on a Saturday. That is the complete cost of entry into having your own eggs, your own meat, and incredible garden compost. That is how it's always been done, and how it should be done. Actually, I know I said we'd cover feeding next time, but if you are going to build this coop this weekend, you need the whole picture right now. There is no point in having a $50 coop if you are immediately going to fall into the trap of spending $50 a month on feed and supplements you do not need. So let's just keep going. Let's talk about the feeding system, the daily management, and the specific breeds that actually thrive in this kind of low-intervention setup. If you are serious about this, you need to understand the whole ecosystem, not just the shelter. Let's break down the feed first, because after the coop, this is where the industry makes its real money off you. The standard advice is to buy bagged, formulated crumbles or pellets. Chick starter, then grower, then layer feed. It is convenient, yes, but it is also expensive, and it completely ignores the fact that a chicken is, by nature, an opportunistic omnivore. They are not designed to eat a sterile, processed pellet their entire lives. They are designed to hunt, scratch, and scavenge. On this property, we use a hybrid feeding model. We do provide a base grain, usually a simple scratch mix of cracked corn, wheat, and oats, which costs a fraction of formulated layer feed. But that is only part of their diet. The rest comes from the land, the garden, and the kitchen. A chicken left to forage in a backyard will consume an incredible amount of insects, grubs, and ticks. They eat weed seeds, clover, and dandelions. This foraging provides the high-quality protein and diverse micronutrients that the bagged feed tries to artificially replicate. If you have your chickens in our A-frame coop, and you leave it in one spot, they will strip that spot bare in a week. That is why, if you have the space, you make the coop a tractor. You attach a rope to one end and pull it to fresh grass every 2 or 3 days. When you do that, you are constantly giving them a fresh salad bar of greens and bugs. Their feed consumption will drop by 30 to 50% during the growing season just by moving the coop. Then there are the kitchen scraps. Almost everything you throw away in the kitchen can go to the chickens. Vegetable peelings, fruit cores, stale bread, leftover rice, meat trimmings, even crushed eggshells, which provide the calcium they need to lay new eggs. The only things you really want to avoid are green potato skins, onions, and anything moldy. By directing your kitchen waste to the chickens, you are turning trash directly into eggs. If you want to cut your feed bill even further, especially in the winter when the bugs are gone, you look at fermenting your grains. It sounds complicated, but it is incredibly simple. You take your basic, cheap scratch grains, put them in a bucket, cover them with water, and let them sit for 3 days. The natural yeasts and bacteria in the air ferment the grains. This process breaks down the anti-nutrients in the seeds, makes the proteins more bioavailable, and creates natural probiotics. The chickens digest it better, meaning they eat less of it to get the same nutrition, and their gut health becomes virtually bulletproof. It takes 3 minutes a day to manage a rotation of 3 buckets, and it cuts your winter feed costs by another 20%. So, you have your $50 coop, and you have your low-cost feeding strategy. Now, let's talk about the birds themselves. If you put highly specialized production hybrids, the kinds of chickens used in factory farms, into a simple backyard setup, they are going to struggle. Those birds have been bred to do one thing: lay an egg every single day for 18 months, and then burn out. They require a highly optimized, high-protein diet to sustain that production, and they do not have the strong foraging instincts or the weather resistance of older breeds. For a low-maintenance, low-cost system, you want heritage breeds: Rhode Island Reds, Plymouth Rocks, Orpingtons, Australorps, Sussex. These are the birds our grandparents kept. They are dual-purpose, meaning they are large enough to be used for meat if you choose, but they are reliable, steady layers. They are excellent foragers. They are heavily feathered, which means they can handle a cold winter in an uninsulated A-frame coop without missing a beat. And most importantly, they have strong survival instincts. They know to watch the sky for hawks, and they know to get inside when the weather turns. When you buy heritage chicks, they might cost $1 or $2 more upfront than a production hybrid, but they will lay reliably for 3 to 5 years, instead of burning out in a year and a half. They fit the system. The system relies on the animal acting like its ancestors, not like a machine. Let's talk about the day-to-day reality of managing this setup. The industry wants you to think you need to be out there constantly, scrubbing waterers, sanitizing roosts, and applying dust mite powders. You don't. A healthy ecosystem manages itself. Your daily routine with this coop should take exactly 5 minutes. You open the door in the morning. You check the feed, you check the water, you collect the eggs, you look at the birds to make sure everyone's eyes are bright and they are moving normally. That is it. Water is the one thing you cannot compromise on. They need clean, unfrozen water every single day. You don't need a heated, nipple-drip automated system. A simple black rubber pan from the farm store works perfectly. In the winter, the black rubber absorbs solar heat to help keep it thawed, and if it does freeze solid, you just flip it over, stomp on the back, and the ice block pops right out. No cracked plastic, no broken heating elements. For parasite control, the chickens handle it themselves if you give them the right environment. Chickens do not bathe in water, they bathe in dust. They dig a shallow hole in the dry dirt, fluff their feathers, and work the fine dust all the way down to their skin. This smothers mites and lice. Because you built a coop with a dirt floor, they have a dust bath available all year round, even when the ground outside is frozen or muddy. If you want to help them out, you can throw a few shovelfuls of wood ash from your fireplace or fire pit into the corner of the coop. Wood ash is highly alkaline and is the best natural preventative for external parasites that exists. It costs nothing, and it works better than the chemical powders sold in the farm stores. What about illness? This is the fear that drives a lot of people to buy expensive medicated feeds and supplements. The truth is, if you have good ventilation, which your hardware cloth A-frame provides, and you have a dry floor, which your deep litter provides, and you let them forage for a diverse diet, your chickens are simply not going to get sick very often. Respiratory issues are almost always caused by poor ventilation and ammonia buildup in tightly sealed, expensive coops. Coccidiosis and internal parasites are usually the result of overcrowding and wet, muddy conditions. The $50 coop prevents these issues by its very design. It moves air. It stays dry. It forces you to keep a small, manageable flock. If a bird does get sick in this system, the hard truth of generations of farming is that you do not spend $200 at a vet for a chicken. You cull the bird to protect the rest of the flock, and you figure out what environmental factor failed. But in a well-managed deep litter coop, that is a rare occurrence. Let's talk a little more about that deep litter, because it is the engine of the whole operation. The biggest mistake beginners make with deep litter is letting it get wet. If your roof leaks, or if your waterer spills, the litter will go from aerobic composting to anaerobic rotting. It will smell terrible, and it will breed disease. If that happens, you have to dig out the wet spot immediately and replace it with fresh, dry carbon. The second biggest mistake is not using enough carbon. The manure is pure nitrogen. If the coop starts to smell like ammonia, it means you don't have enough carbon to balance the nitrogen. The solution is always add more straw, add more dry leaves, add more pine shavings. Never use cedar shavings, by the way. The oils can damage their respiratory systems. Stick to pine or straw. When in doubt, add more bedding. The chickens will turn it over, the microbes will do the work, and the smell will vanish in 24 hours. By the time spring rolls around, that litter is going to be 8 to 12 inches deep. It will look like rich, dark soil at the bottom. When you clean it out, you don't put it directly on your growing vegetable plants, because it is still too hot with nitrogen and can burn them. You pile it up in a corner of the yard, let it age for a few months, or you spread it on your garden beds in the late fall so it can break down over the winter. The fertility it adds to your soil is staggering. You will grow tomatoes and squash like you have never seen. This entire approach is about closing the loop. The garden feeds the chickens through scraps and weeds. The chickens feed you through eggs and meat. The chickens feed the garden through their composted litter. The $50 coop is just the housing that allows this cycle to happen without draining your wallet. We have completely lost touch with this cycle. We have been convinced that every problem requires a purchased product to solve. Raccoons? Buy a $300 automatic metal door. Cold weather? Buy a ceramic heat emitter. Smelly coop? Buy a chemical odor neutralizer spray. Decreased egg production? Buy a $20 bag of specialized molting supplements. Every single one of those solutions is a band-aid for a poorly designed system. A well-designed system, rooted in how these animals actually live and function, solves those problems for free. Hardware cloth solves the raccoons. Deep litter and wind blocking solves the cold. Proper carbon ratios solve the smell. A natural diet and an understanding of the bird's natural life cycle solves the egg production expectations. This isn't just about saving money, although it does that exceptionally well. It is about taking back control of your food and your property from a consumer system that wants you dependent on it. When you build that A-frame with your own hands, and you source your own carbon for the floor, and you feed those birds from your own land, you step outside of that system. You become a producer rather than just a consumer. That feeling, the first time you walk out on a crisp morning and pull 3 warm eggs out of a wooden box you built for next to nothing, knowing exactly what those birds ate and exactly how they live, that is what this is actually all about. The $50 is just the price of admission. So, get the lumber, get the hardware cloth. Do not buy the chicken wire. Set aside 3 hours this weekend. You don't need perfect carpentry skills. You just need to put the screws in tight and make sure the wire is stapled down. The chickens will not judge your cuts if they are a little crooked. If you want the exact cut list for the A-frame and the deep dive into fermenting feed, building your soil, and managing your property without relying on the hardware store every weekend, that is exactly what the books are for. The link is right down below. Let me know in the comments what breed you are planning to get for your coop, or if you are already running a flock, what your biggest daily struggle is. I guarantee you, the solution is simpler and cheaper than you think. Keep it simple, trust the process, and I will see you on the next one.